Will the meeting please come to order? A quorum of 175 is present. With your permission, we will waive the reading of the constable's return of the warrant. Welcome to Dover's 2023 June special town meeting. First, a few preliminaries. The fire chief reminds us that there is no smoking in the building and no sitting in the aisles or on the stairs. Please place your cell phone in airplane mode or turn it off. A few years ago, we had problems with our PA system because of interaction with cell phones. Non-voters and non-residents are welcome to attend our town meeting, but they should be seated in the area designated to my left or in the designated area in the cafeteria. Some introductions. I am Jim Rapetti, the moderator for the town of Dover, and then in that role, I will oversee tonight's proceedings. To my immediate right are the Board of Selectmen, John Jeffries, Robert Springer Chair, and Robert Hunter. Behind me to my right are Nina Pickering Cook, Town Council, David Havlin, Assistant Town Moderator, and Felicia Hoffman, Town Clerk. To my far right, to your left, over on the other side of the stage, is the Warrant Committee. And please raise your hand as I call your names. Melissa Herman, Chair. Jerry Chin. Cam Hudson. Sarah Cadena. Sarah Cadena Kinney. Gordon Kinder. Stephen Migowski. Janet McCormick. Peter Smith. And Woody Weiss. A few words on procedure and tradition for town meeting. One of the handouts that you received today is entitled A Note from the Moderator and Assistant Town Moderator about town meeting procedure. And it summarizes the basic rules for town meeting, but let me emphasize a few key points. Before each article, I will state the subject matter of the article and then recognize a person to make a motion on the article. The full text of each of these articles is printed in the handout from the Warrant Committee, and that handout also includes the recommendations from the Warrant Committee with respect to each of the articles. If you wish to discuss a motion, you must be recognized by the moderator before speaking. You will note that there are 3 microphones in front of the stage. One of the microphones is marked yes, and that is a microphone that persons who wish to speak in favor of the motion should proceed to. Another microphone is marked no, so if you wish to speak in opposition to the motion, you should proceed to that microphone. And the microphone in the middle with the question mark is if you have any questions. I will alternate between these microphones to be sure that everybody has a voice. I recognize that some of you may not be able to proceed to the front of the auditorium. In that case, if you wish to speak, raise your hand and we will bring you a microphone so that you can ask your question or make a statement about your position on a particular item. I will alternate between people who are seated and those who are on the front based on the relative numbers of the participants who are queued up. After you are recognized, please state your name and your address. To save time and to allow as many people as possible the opportunity to speak, we limit persons presenting a motion to 10 minutes and comments from the floor to 2 minutes. Please try to limit your remarks to new facts or new perspectives. Repeating what has already been said is unlikely to help your case and indeed may hurt it if people are anxious to vote on the question. The Assistant Town Moderator, David Havlin, will ring a bell on the stage once you have 30 seconds left, and when your 2 minutes has expired, he will ring the bell twice. Limiting comments from the floor to 2 minutes will provide the maximum opportunity for all those who wish to speak to be heard. The Code of Conduct for the tradition of town meeting in Dover has been refined for 187 years. Too many rules in our town meeting will become a game only lawyers can play, too loose, and it will become anarchy. If anyone plans to offer an amendment tonight to any of the articles, please come up to the podium now so that I can have you confer with our town clerk and our town council to help you draft the motion in order for it to comply with relevant town bylaws and state statutes. All of our bylaws that will be adopted, or if they are adopted tonight, have to be approved by the Attorney General. So it's very important that any motions to amend comply with the relevant laws. A further word about our conduct of the meeting. Disagreement is the essence of democracy. It would be a very boring town meeting if we agreed about everything. But it is imperative that we disagree without being disagreeable. Let us honor the memory of all those who sacrificed to give us this great gift of democracy by conducting ourselves in a professional and collegial manner. Emotional outbursts or accusations directed toward individuals or groups have no place here, and they dishonor the memory of those who sacrificed to provide us this great gift of democracy. As I mentioned, democracy is a wonderful prize that has been preserved through the sacrifice and efforts of millions of our citizens. Let us take a moment to silently recognize those who are putting themselves in harm's way at this very moment in the service of our country. A moment of silence, please. Thank you, and may God bless America. I would like to spend a few moments now talking about the voting process. Felicia Hoffman, our town clerk, has worked very hard with Turning Technology to organize this assembly and the distribution of response cards that you were issued as you entered the high school. When we have a vote, you will have 10 seconds to select either 1A if you're in favor of the motion, or to select 2B if you're opposed to the motion. If your response card does not work during a vote, we ask that you please raise your hand and an attendant will assist you. When you're pressing the button, you'll see a green light flash momentarily on your card, and that's the way you'll be able to determine that your vote has been registered. If during the 10-second period you feel compelled to vote more than once, only your last vote will be registered. Okay, so Jessica, are we ready to test our cards? Okay, so if you want to press 1 or 2, and you may vote now. Jessica, is that right? Okay, you may vote now. And you should see a green light flash as you're pressing 1 or 2. Okay, did anybody have press the button and not have the green light flash? Please raise your hand. Okay, we have somebody over here. Andre. Okay, was there anybody else? We have somebody back in the very back up. Yeah, hang on a second, Jessica. He's still distributing them. Okay, let's try it again just to make sure that everybody's working now. Jessica, give me the sign when we're ready. You may vote now. Press 1 or 2 and look for the green flash. Okay, is everybody all set? Did everybody register? Have a green light? Okay. Another important note before we move to the motions. If you pull out the handout on procedure, town meeting procedure, and look at the second page, you'll see that there's an item marked 4 that deals with a motion to reconsider. Our town meeting allows, after a motion has been either accepted or approved or rejected, the town meeting can vote to have that item reconsidered. It is therefore very important that if your favorite motion or your least favorite motion either succeeds or fails, that you stay until the end of the meeting, because that motion is always possible or is eligible to be reconsidered by the town meeting. So very important point that I wanted to mention tonight. We have 3 motions that we'll be considering, and it's very important that you stay until the end of the meeting so that your favorite motion or your least favorite motion, if it's reconsidered, you'll be able to continue to register your vote. Okay? Now, before we move to the actual articles that are on the warrant, it is customary to recognize the chairman of the warrant committee for a motion governing the conduct of the meeting. Ms. Herman.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the following rule be adopted for the conduct of the meeting. Any amendment to the main motion that would increase an appropriation must contain a provision for the source of funds for the increase, such that the total amount to be raised and appropriated at the meeting will not be increased.
Thank you, Ms. Herman. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Hudson. So this motion requires that if somebody's making an amendment that requires funding, that they have to identify the source of funding for their amendment. Is there any discussion on this motion? Okay, hearing none, we'll move to a vote. Remember, if you're in favor of the motion, you'll press 1 for yes on my signal. If you're opposed, you'll press 2. You may vote now. Okay, motion carries. Okay, we now move to the substance of the meeting. First article deals with the appropriation for the Carroll Community Center project. Ms. Herman.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the... Continue with the motion?
I'm sorry?
Should I continue with the motion?
Oh, I'm sorry?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, please read the motion. Sorry.
Okay. Mr. Moderator, I move that the town appropriate a sum of $6,600,000 to be expended by the Board of Selectmen for the purpose of the design and construction of the Carroll Community Center, including all costs incidental and related thereto. That to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, is authorized to borrow said sum under Chapter 44, Section 7.1 of the Massachusetts General Laws or any other enabling authority. That the Board of Selectmen is authorized to contract for and expend any federal or state aid available for the project, and that the Board of Selectmen is authorized to take any other action necessary or convenient to carry out this project, provided, however, that this vote shall not take effect until the town votes to exempt from the limitation on total taxes imposed by Chapter 59, Section 21C of the Massachusetts General Laws, Proposition 2.5, amounts required to pay the principal and interest on the borrowing authorized by this vote as set forth on the ballot for June 12, 2023 election.
Thank you, Ms. Herman. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Hudson. This is going to require a 2/3 vote because it requires a borrowing by the town. I would now like to turn to Bob Springett, the chair of the Board of Selectmen, to first discuss this article, and then we'll be hearing from some other town boards as well. Mr. Springett?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Who's running the slides? Okay. Can we have slide 1, please?
Uh-oh.
Well, in the interim, I want to welcome you all and say good morning and thank you for coming out today. It's not really a super day, so probably people were just bored and didn't feel like staying at home. So the first 4 slides of this presentation are meant to remind you what it is that we're voting for. So if we can go to slide 1. 1 second. Yep, sorry. Due to technical difficulties, John's going to sing to entertain everybody.
I was just going to say, you're supposed to tap dance.
You knew I was going to get
I
you.
knew you were going to, yeah.
Absolutely.
What did he say?
No,
No,
absolutely not.
Ruth, where are you when I need you?
Yeah, a plan B.
Mark's up there helping him. Give him a second.
Okay.
Who's doing
Acting out the slides.
She might take to the engineering booth in the back.
Mark.
There's an
handle it.
engineer who's
I don't know
got
what
the
happened.
Got the
connection.
connections.
It's odd, you wonder.
It's
He'll be
either
fine in a
wireless
second.
or it's direct to there. It looks
Ne-
like there's
I
the
think
direct connection.
he hit the wrong
So
switch.
here we go.
Okay, give it a second.
Well, this is the second meeting of today.
She's going to do it.
Okay.
You'll be all right.
Well, thank you for your patience.
So far.
Yeah, please don't revolt. I mean, this should be a quick meeting, so
You just lost 2 minutes, Bob.
I know.
There we go. We're up.
There are 4 preceding slides. Okay. So we had heard, I was chided by some residents about making sure people remember what it is that we're supposed to be voting on. So I have 4 slides here that show the community center as designed and voted for in 2021. So this is a view of the building, of the design from Springdale. This is a view from Center Street showing the community center room. It's opening to the landscaping in back and the patio. And this is a view of coming from the parking lot. This is really designed as the main entrance to the building. So you get a good sense. So you can see from these photos that the design of the building has not changed at all, nor the footprint, nor the functionality. This is a walkthrough into the reception area and then beyond into the sort of mini cafe meeting area and then ultimately to the community center room. So when I look at this, I was always impressed with the light inside the building. Up, go back one.
You had to push it loud.
Well, you know what I can do. So I can talk this through. There was a screen up there that said it's about community, aspirations, values, and vision. When I first began to think about what I was going to talk to you folks about, I had been receiving a tremendous amount of feedback about tax implications and payment streams and et cetera. And I began to think more and more about it. And I was reminded as I listened to the Warrant Committee, as I listened to the Capital Budget Committee, and as I listened to resident feedback, that yes, the tax impact is important for people. But Ford and I, when we started this initiative back in 2018, we ultimately concluded that at the very base of this issue is about community, our aspirations, our values, and our vision. That's none of the above. That's my highlight film from California, right after the snow melted.
Bob's most recent vacation.
This may be a longer meeting than I thought.
Continue
I wanna- All right. So I'm going to go on. The next slide was a slide about project status. And we've been at this for over 20 years, trying to get a community center developed for residents. That's a heck of a long time. The current effort that I referred to with Ford, we began this in 2018. We can go past that one. In 2018, and Ford and I started to look at what it would cost to renovate the Carroll building at that point in time versus what it would cost to build new. That effort ultimately culminated in a 2019 town meeting where voters chose to renovate Carroll versus having a new building. 2021, the town voted overwhelmingly to approve an $18.8 million borrowing to continue the community center project, renovating the 1910 Carroll School and adding new space. So I just want to make a point that building a public space, whether it's a hospital, a library, or a school, is really about who we are as a community, what we value, what we appreciate, and ultimately, it's an optimistic view about where we want to get to. Next. Oh, it's too far.
Oh, no.
There we go. Too far. So one of the things we do know is that, everybody's heard about this, is that the costs of the project have continued to increase from the 18.850 originally voted and approved in 2021. It increased $6.6 million. The cost drivers are all COVID related in some way, shape, or form. COVID caused huge disruptions to the market economy, to the supply chain, and government spending to abate the worst impacts of the pandemic on the less fortunate people, added to the inflationary pressure. So material costs have risen and are still increasing. Labor availability is a problem, and project demand for buildings and public space in Massachusetts is high. So the tax impact of borrowing an additional $6.6 million. We put this chart together trying to give people an idea of the range of expenses of costs that would incur for the $6.6 million. At the low end, $750,000. The estimated tax impact of the $6.6 million borrowing is $114 a year. Now, I caution, we don't know the interest rate. So these numbers are based on an interest rate that we think was close to the market at the time, at somewhere around 3.5%. A 1.750 house, an extra $265 a year. And as you get higher end, obviously the tax impact increases. So most houses, I chose this range of home values because it represents close to 90% of the houses in Dover. So you can see that the tax impact for the average homeowner, the median, is going to be between $114 and $189. Looking at it a slightly different way, the orange is debt from the region that will roll off in 2025. The green color is the borrowing that we've already committed to. That's the $18.8 million that was approved in 2021. You can see if you look at you guys can't see it, but I've looked at it. The green area of the $18.8 million is about $350 per year per household. Blue, which would be the 6.6 borrowing, is about $225 over time. So that's sort of the impact through time. That's how it would run off through time. And so that's the true impact, the cost of borrowing for the $25.4 million, broken into the two big major components. And it's up to you guys to decide whether that's a good idea or better to continue or not to continue. Next slide, please. So this is pretty clear to me. I've spent a fair amount of time looking at this, talking to people. Article 1 requires a 2/3 yes vote to be approved. It also requires that we, at the town election, a week hence, 2 weeks hence, that we have a majority of the townspeople approve the funding. So in a very simplistic way, if the $6.6 million is approved today, the project moves forward, you'll have a community center probably in the fall of 2024. That comes with the tax increase that's contained at the bottom of the page. There's a price for getting this thing done. Next, please. So a no vote results in essentially a suspended project. We would, the Board of Selectmen have continuously affirmed their belief that the town wants a community center, and we would do everything we can to make sure that that happened. But this particular option 2, starting again where Ford and I were in 2018, it's going to be a significant delay to the project. And there are several questions that need to be answered, whether or not we can use the money, how can we leverage the architect's work, et cetera, et cetera. Those are all unknowns. What's not unknown is I would expect this to take at a minimum a year and more likely 2 years. So you're looking at a no vote means at least a 2-year gap, and there's no guarantee that we would be able to design something acceptable to the community in that time frame. We already know that the option that we've looked at, the 2021 option, meets a lot of community requirements, and the vote again was overwhelming. So for me, Article 1 really represents your last best chance to get a community center built in the next year or so. Otherwise, you're looking at, in all probability, substantial delay. One of the other things that came up during the discussions that we had were a series of questions about how we as a Board of Selectmen evaluate projects and how we allocate free cash. It's really not a mystery. It's sort of we follow best practices. And one of the things that we are most concerned about is making sure that since we have varied constituencies within our town, that we are equitable in thinking through project requests and how to spend, quote, our savings account. Those are the prime considerations. The other thing that's very important for us is to have a forward view of demand. We have tools now that allow us to do that on the equipment side of the house, on the maintenance side of the house. There are always sort of surprises, like Claybrook Road was kind of a surprise, and we have to deal with that as well. So money gets allocated to things that we know. We have a reserve for emergencies and contingencies, and we want to make sure that we are equitable in the distribution of free cash from the town. By the way, it requires your vote. So under future considerations, there we go, next one, yep. So the two things that we know about today that will be coming up for your consideration, the Hale Reservation Project, which goes back to at least when I was first elected to the Board of Selectmen in 2018. It's a proposal for a conservation restriction, a permanent conservation restriction on 640 acres of the Hale property located in Dover at a cost of $10 million. You'll be hearing a lot more about that in the next several weeks and months. The objective is to try to get to a town meeting vote in the fall of 2023. The others, we've witnessed a spike in capital expenditures for the FY25 to the FY28 period of about just under $15 million. Now, the funny thing about capital expenditures versus the Hale Reservation is we have a little bit more flexibility in how we handle requests from town departments. Some of them get rejected, some of them get pushed out in time, et cetera. So that's a little bit more manageable in terms of how we handle it. But nevertheless, it's something that you guys, as residents of the town and voters, should at least know about. Next. Well, I hope I was intelligible. I'm never intelligent. And I get told that all the time by so many people. But I want to thank you for your attention and again, for coming out today. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Now, please reserve your applause for the end of the meeting so that we can proceed quickly. Thank you. Next, I would like to call upon Melissa Herman, Chair of the Warrant Committee, to present the Warrant Committee's deliberations. Melissa?
Thank you. And so the Warrant Committee has provided a handout, which you should all have, which is a summary of our positions on Article 1. So as we looked into Article 1, we were split as a committee. So our vote on whether or not to recommend was split 4-4, and this is specifically focusing on the 6.6 incremental that we'd be looking to approve for the community center renovation and construction. And so the committee, because we didn't have a united view or even a majority or minority view as a group, agreed to share some of the positions behind why some would recommend and others would not. And so position 1 that we have listed here, and this is the group that would support recommending the approval, some of the factors included were included in this presentation here, but I'll summarize them from our perspective as well. It was felt by some members of the committee that the town has a need for a facility to function as a center point of the community for group gatherings. Another thing that this might do would be to anchor a more vibrant town center and help attract or bolster commercial development in this area. As mentioned, the further delay may be unlikely to produce cost savings, and that would actually potentially increase costs for insurance or housing the COA or Parks and Recreation in the interlude when we don't have a community center. There was a feeling that the notion of proceeding with a smaller center based on the $18.85 million already approved would produce unsatisfactory results. And then, although the town faces substantial costs, capital costs associated with modernizing infrastructure and possibly conserving parts of the Hale Reservation, the conservative fiscal policy followed by the town for many years means that we should be able to finance these expenditures while minimizing the impact on the tax rate. So that was the group that was considering recommending. For the other part of the group that did not recommend, a number of the individual decisions included some of these factors. The proposed $6.6 million increase for the renovation represents a 35% increase over the amount we approved at a special town meeting in 2021, which is nearly double the $13 million estimate that was the expectation until early 2021. Taxpayers are being asked to consider this large increase at the start of a 4-year period in which the town expects to incur higher than historically normal capital costs beyond the $4.2 million that was approved recently in May at the annual town meeting. There's a projected need of over $14.6 million in capital in upcoming years, as well as the $10 million for Hale Reservation, which will be proposed in the next few months. Those expenses, when combined with the $25.4 million proposed for this building, represent more than 125% of the town's fiscal year 2024 operating budget. This group felt this was not sustainable, and the tax impact presented at this special town meeting today likely underestimates the actual tax increase that residents will face in the next few years if all of these additional expenses are approved. The second point is that taxpayers have not been provided detailed information on alternative options. Alternative options could have included a smaller community center, more limited amenities, or a choice to delay or forego the construction altogether. Such information would have allowed taxpayers to make an informed decision on whether the increased cost is justified compared to the other available options. No alternative options have been evaluated or even considered in the approximately 12 months since the 2022 project bid went over budget, leaving taxpayers with the difficult choice of either paying an additional $6.6 million or facing uncertainty regarding the use of the previously authorized $18.85 million. Lastly, taxpayers have not had the opportunity to consider the $6.6 million increase presented today along with the Hale proposal, the latter of which would be considered again if potentially here in the fall. It's crucial to evaluate significant capital expenses in both a strategic manner that considers the cost and benefit to the town of each project on an individual and a collective basis. Approaching these proposals individually without a comprehensive assessment is not in the best interest of Dover or its taxpayers. So the discussion of this group, a significant amount of time went into this, and we appreciate not only the participation on the committee as we debated this through, but also the input from the building committee, from the Board of Selectmen, and the town. In the end, our positions on this are both driven by a commitment to responsible and prudent management of the town's resources, and we'll hope that you'll consider this today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. Next, we will hear from the Council on Aging, Robert Cox.
Thought I was supposed to be last, but this is great.
Okay.
Hope your slides were.
Okay, I'm Bob Cox, 14 Cedar Hill Road, and I represent this morning the Dover Council on Aging. As of 2022, there were 1,520 residents of Dover aged 60 and older, representing approximately 25% of the town's population. The COA supports seniors and their families through information, outreach, advocacy, transportation, and health and social programs. Up until last year, we used space in the community center to provide programs for fitness and health, socialization, meeting, supportive services, and educational programs. With the closing of the center, we have moved our offices into temporary quarters in the townhouse fireside room. Programs are held at the townhouse, the Dover Legion, Most Precious Blood Church, the Dover Church, St. Dunstan's Church, the Town Library, Powysset Farm, and Chickering School. The coordination of offerings in multiple locations continues to be a challenge. A recent needs assessment done by the Council on Aging highlighted the demographics of an increasing senior population, increasing numbers of Dover seniors choosing to age in place, and the need for additional programs and services. A new Carroll Community Center, as presented, would allow programming, management, support services in a centralized location. As a board, we support the funding necessary to construct and renovate the Carroll Community Center. We are pleased with the building design focusing on flexible uses serving a multi-generational community. It creates an open environment encouraging residents to meet, network, and be active. It provides a welcoming atmosphere, aesthetically pleasing architecture, and a healthy interior environment. It would be the focal point of town life encouraging community engagement. There are appropriate spaces for park and recreation offerings, as well as meeting places for private groups and other Dover organizations. We view the proposed center as a place for all ages to come together for structured and unstructured activity throughout the day and into the evening. In the previous presentation, we explored the tax impact of the additional borrowing needed to move forward. as almost 75% of the cost of construction is already borrowed and is amortizing and currently included in your tax bill, the additional $6.6 million in debt adds only a modest increase to individual tax burden. In addition, the debt of the Dover-Sherburne Regional School District for the construction of the middle school will be totally repaid in 2025, meaning that at that time, debt service for the town would be reduced to near present levels. The Board of Directors of the Dover Council on Aging, for these reasons, urge you to vote yes on Article 1 and Article 2 to provide the town of Dover with the community space it needs and deserves. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Next, Chris Boland from Parks and Recreation.
Thank you. Good morning. I just have one additional comment to make. Park and Rec had to also vacate its space in March of last year. And so we are a department in exile in the town garage. And the original plan was to be out for 18 months, one winter, and then back in this coming fall. And so one of the consequences of delaying this override vote a year, in addition to being over by another $3.5 million, is we are out of our space for yet another year. And so Mark and the team, similar to Council on Aging, are doing our best with the help of a lot of partners that Bob just mentioned, very similar group as well as others, to provide programming, but it is a very scaled back offering of programming. So we ask your support to bring us back into our space, because we need this new space to really offer the full potential for the community. You know, the notion from this presentation that we can renovate the 1910 building, it's absurd to suggest that that would meet most of our needs. It will meet very few of our needs. That'll get us office space, a meeting room, and a coffee machine. We have all that at the Highway Department. Mark can administer fine, we just can't provide community. Please give us our space so we can continue to provide great community service. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That concludes the presentations by the town boards. We're now opening it up for discussion from our citizens. If you wish to speak in favor of the motion, please proceed to the yes microphone. If you have a question, proceed to the middle microphone. And if you wish to speak against the motion, please proceed to the no microphone. Mr. Long, I see you standing. Would you like to approach the microphone, sir?
Charlie Long, 121 Walpole Street. I'd like to speak primarily to the matter of the Council on Aging facilities. I think it's important to take a look at the total available facilities in Dover. We have 4 churches, we've got a Legion Hall. All of these places also have facilities for senior meetings, for functions. They have kitchen space. All of these places make the space available for senior functions at relatively modest cost. It just doesn't make any sense to go spending millions of dollars to have a public building built for specifically to do what we can do with present facilities that current institutions are perfectly happy to provide. This is just completely superfluous. And before anyone misunderstands what the status of the Council on Aging is, the statistic of the number of people over 60 is kind of irrelevant here. You're looking at people in their 70s and 80s here, and that's a relatively small group, and a very small group that actually participates in Council on Aging functions. This is not a large number of people, and they're not a bunch of, let's say, old geezers who have stuck around town when they should have moved on. This is a small, interested group. They're not in great need, and I think that the idea that somehow a government building is going to provide a better space for senior functions is just a fiction. And who wants to go into a sterile government building when the alternative is a warm and cozy Legion Hall, or at least you can get a drink? Come on.
30 seconds, Charlie.
Let's get real here. Spending millions of dollars for Council on Aging facilities is just a duplication and unnecessary.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Now we'll proceed to the yes microphone. Sir, state your name and address, please.
Alan Moss, Pegan Lane. My comment is that I've lived in town for 10 years, and I think our investment in the town has been sclerotic at best. The towns around us are all investing in community centres and facilities, and we really have not had a major infrastructure upgrade in the 10 years I've been here. The second point is that the 10 million on Hale is a hypothetical, so throwing it in here to scare people on the cost, it may never be voted on, it may never get passed. We should really be voted on the cost of this motion and not a hypothetical on Hale next year.
Thank you. Is there a spokesperson in opposition, or do you have a question, sir?
I'm going to speak in opposition.
Okay, go ahead, sir. State your name and address.
Good morning, everyone. My name is John Quackenbush. I live at 86 Walpole, and I'm a member of the Capital Budget Committee. Part of the role of the Capital Budget Committee is to look at the finances in the town, in particular as regards to capital expenses, things like the fire engines, investment in the school, and infrastructure. And we saw a presentation last week on this community center. I will begin by saying that I've always been skeptical of this community center as it's designed and its ability to meet the needs of our town. It doesn't include a full kitchen, and so it limits the types of events that we can carry out. It doesn't have a full gym, which limits the types of programs that can be carried out by Park and Rec and other organizations. Nevertheless, the town voted in favor of it. When we heard a presentation at the Capital Budget Committee this week, we had a long debate about the funds and the use of funds and the impact on the town. And at the end, I actually cast a vote in favor of recommending approval. My concern, though, and it was a pained vote when I made it, was how we would use the funds if we didn't approve the additional amount of money. We've already borrowed $18.8 million. It doesn't make sense to borrow the additional money. And if we can't repurpose that $18.8 million in a meaningful way, then we're sort of facing a choice where we either invest more or come up with something which is even going to be worse potentially than meeting the needs of the town. However, in doing more research into the repurposing of the funds, it does appear that we have potential to do that. We also have the opportunity to build a smaller but expandable community center that in the future may better meet the needs of this town and its community than the poor compromise we're faced with today. So I would urge you to vote no, despite my earlier vote on the committee to recommend. So I apologize for my earlier vote. I urge you to consider voting no. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Somebody speaking in favor, ma'am?
Hi. I hope you can hear me.
You're going to have to speak into the mic. Yeah.
Sorry. Lots of mics. Oh, now you can hear me. Hi, my name is Rochelle Nesrella. I live at 148 Walpole Street. I understand that none of us want to spend more money on the center. I certainly don't. But we are at a very unique moment in the history of our town where we're very close to getting this done. As Bob mentioned, I understand it's been studied for over 20 years. I also understand that at least $2 million of what we've spent so far on the project to get to where we are cannot be repurposed. That's money that's sunk down the drain on consultants and other costs. I further understand from basic economics that things are only going to get more expensive. That if we don't do this now, if we care about a community center, now is the best deal we're ever going to get, even though it's not a deal that anybody likes. No one wants to see increased costs. I will note that the increased costs look to me about the size of 1 month's electric bill spread out over the course of a year. Finally, I'd like to speak to the need for a center, since that's a question in some people's minds. Many people feel we don't need the center. Children leave Chickering and walk to town on sidewalks, cross streets, and hang out in front of the Dover Market and go to the library. They don't have a place to congregate. People are working from home. They may be isolated. It might be nice to have a center to go where you could have a coffee, maybe bump into a friend, maybe you bring your computer, do some work.
30 seconds.
People, they're middle ages, like myself. It's hard to get together with friends. Maybe you just show up at the community center and people come and go, and literally community gets built. And I certainly echo the comments of the chair of the Council on Aging. Our seniors are lonely. My mother lives in town. She's lonely. And I think we really need to support activities and healthy gatherings for them, for their wellness. And as we all hopefully become seniors, that will benefit us all. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And now I hear somebody is approached with a question, sir.
Hi, Dan Chase, 65 Main Street, not Walpole. I wonder if someone could speak more to the question of using the already funded $18.85 million to a redesign. It says uncertainty. Can someone say how that would be resolved?
Sure. Board of Selectmen, Ms. Hunter?
So I am going to try and explain this and not overcomplicate it. So the issue with repurposing the debt is these are general obligation bonds. They can be repurposed. The question is whether or not when we repurpose the bonds, they will still be eligible as excluded bonds. So what does that mean? It means that right now they're excluded. We don't pay for them out of our operating budget. If it's deemed that the new purpose for the bonds does not mean that excluded requirement, the debt service on the bond, what we pay for the bond annually, will come out of our operating budget. So currently our principal and interest is about $900,000. It declines, but that $900,000 would immediately come out of the operating budget and reduce what we can spend on other things. And as you all know, the operating budget is just our property taxes. That's how it gets funded. So that's the question.
Well, I really wasn't asking whether we could use that money for other things. The question is whether it could be used for a redesigned community center.
We believe it can be used to redesign the community center. Currently, we have spent $2 million of the 18, and as Mr. Springett's presentation showed, that would be, if you vote no, we would have to go back to the drawing board. We have spent $2 million on soft costs, and we have no idea what we would need to spend on those to move forward.
Thank you, sir. Anybody speaking in opposition? Okay, we'll move back to the in favor microphone. Name and address, sir.
Calden Bates, 4 Greenwood Road. I'm probably the youngest person here.
You're going to have to talk into the mic, sir.
Yeah, no, sorry. I'm not used to that problem.
There you go.
So I grew up in this town. I've gone to Chickering. I went to the middle school, and I graduated from the high school last year. And something that I've really always noticed about Dover is there's really not a lot to do for kids in this town. You have your sports, your extracurriculars, your clubs and all that, but there really isn't a gathering place, where people can just go to and hang out and socialize. And I think this redesign, this voting yes on this approval would expedite the process and allow future generations of kids who are, going to grow up in this town and go to the elementary school and middle school and high school to have a place to, socialize, make friends, do homework together, have projects and stuff like that in the center of the town where most people can get access to it. And I would just really like to see that as something that, I might not have been able to do, but if we vote yes on this, hopefully the next round of kids will be able to. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And there's somebody who wishes to speak in opposition?
Not necessarily in opposition. Doug Strauss from Glen Street. I am in the real estate business, have been for 40 years, working for one of the largest development and construction companies in the state. And I know we're talking about a lot of the warmer and fuzzier things here as far as community needs go, but I don't understand the pricing on any of these estimates at $1,250 a foot. And I'd love to hear a little bit more information where these numbers came from, because I'm doing a lab building right now, fully fit up for under $1,000 a foot. I opposed this project years ago when it came up with Carol Lisbon. Never thought it made any sense to repurpose the building, typically inefficient to do so. And here we are looking at numbers that are outrageous, and I'd love to know, where that goes, because we're talking about such a huge increase. I also think there's a lot of speculation here about that cost will be more in the future. I actually disagree with that. I think the world's changed quite a bit, and we'll see over time some reduction in pricing. So it's not necessarily a bad thing to slow down maybe a little bit and think about this a little differently from a construction and design standpoint. So if somebody can answer the costing questions, I'd love to hear that.
Okay, thank you. Who would like to respond to that? Bob?
Let me just start by saying the process for building in the public sector is very different than building in the private sector. There is a series of laws we have to go through. There were a series of regulations we have to meet. And as we went through this process, starting in 2018, we followed the rules all the way through. So the first thing that we did was create a building committee chaired by Ford Spaulding, and they in turn selected an architect, and they in turn selected an owner's project manager. These are all highly qualified people, and they worked diligently since the beginning to manage the project, manage the design, and everybody needs to understand that the design reflects the desire of the community. So it's not like we could pick and choose what we wanted to do, and it reflects, and every step along the way was voted for by the community. So this is a community building designed by architects listening to the community. The cost, on the other hand, was sort of the responsibility of our building committee and our owner's project manager. And I will say that in 2021, in March, and I've said this publicly before, the building committee, and I was a member of the building committee, thought we were looking at a $15 million project. A $15 million project at that point in time, looking at all of the complexities that were involved, was a good deal. We were stunned when the bids came in at $19 million. And at the time, the explanation at the time was, as I had said in one of the slides, it was all COVID-related disruption to the global economy, not just the U.S. economy, to the global economy, to the global supply chain, and that has continued for the additional couple of years. So whether or not the price is right, wrong, or indifferent, we've done our due diligence to make sure that we're getting the best deal that we can. There are issues in town that, again, besides being a public building, are unique. We don't have a water supply system in the center of town. We have to store water for fire purposes. That's a big spend that a lot of other community centers do not have. The other issue was we have a penchant for brick. So brick is expensive relative to clapboard, for example. So there are other issues involved in why the cost of this particular project escalated to the extent that they did. Now, there was a comment made earlier about doing due diligence. We as a Board of Selectmen, working with the building committee, spent the better part of the last half of 2022 doing a due diligence review of all of the work that had been done by our architects and by the building committee. That group came up with a series of recommendations to try to mitigate costs. Those recommendations were reviewed by our builders and by the due diligence builder. They came to a reconciliation. Those changes were incorporated in the design, not necessarily in their construction documents. Again, going back to that due diligence review, the big differences were choice of material and fire suppression. The rest of it was relatively small bore activity. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, thank you, sir. Terrence, did you want to speak?
Good morning, everybody. Terry Soboleski from 39 Rolling Lane.
Terry, you need to speak closer to the mic.
You have to get the mic tilted towards you.
Good morning, everybody. Terry Soboleski from 39 Rolling Lane. I just wanted to reiterate a couple of quick points. Many people from across our town, folks with extraordinary depth of expertise and knowledge and insight with respect to this project, have been working at this for, as was mentioned, 4 to 5 years now. It is a fact that we have considered many, many alternatives. And we have run down many paths trying to find the optimal financial outcome and the optimal outcome for our community. This option that was presented today definitively represents what that collective feedback has asked us to build for our community over the last 45 years, or 4 to 5, not 45 years, 4 to 5 years.
I'm not that old.
It does feel like 45, by the way. Our alternative is not to delay or to redesign this project. In fact, we had hoped 2 years ago that prices might come down and things might get better, but they did not. They went in the other direction. It is a false premise to believe that some other outcome or opportunity or alternative will present itself. And so I just want to encourage us all to please not squander this opportunity. I'm going to vote not in my interests, but in our interest, and I'm going to vote for the community center we have all asked for.
Thank you, sir. Question, sir, or speaking in opposition, or question?
Bradley Passer, 5 Conrad Lane, and my question is I'd like to actually move the question, so it's more of a statement about the question.
Okay, very good. There has been a motion made to move the question. For those of you who are new to town meeting, if there is a motion made and it is seconded, we must move to consider that motion immediately with no further debate. If the motion to move the question is adopted by a majority vote, we will then move immediately to vote on the main motion dealing with Article 1. So first let me ask, is there a second to this motion? Okay, motion has been seconded to move the question, so we will now move to a vote. If you vote yes, we will move immediately to a vote on the main motion. If you vote no, debate will continue. Jessica, give me the sign. You may vote now.
It's a 2/3, not majority.
I'm sorry, it's a 2/3 vote, not majority, but vote now. Motion carries by more than 2/3. Okay. Okay, we will now move to a vote on the main motion. So the main motion is that you are in favor of the construction and borrowing for the Carroll Community Center. You'll be pressing 1 for yes. If you're opposed, you'll be pressing 2 for no. This is also a 2/3 vote. You may vote now. The vote is 220 to 85. The motion carries by more than 2/3. Okay, just a reminder, this can come up again. So please wait until we get please wait until we get through Article 2 and Article 3 and dissolve the meeting. Let's move to Article 2. Ms. Herman.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town appropriate a sum of $174,000 to be expended by the Board of Selectmen for the purpose of the including an outdoor recreation court and swing area at the Carroll Community Center, including all costs incidental and related thereto, that to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, is authorized to borrow said sum under Chapter 44, Section 7-1 of the Massachusetts General Laws, or any other enabling authority. That the Board of Selectmen is authorized to contract for and expend any federal or state aid available for the project, and that the Board of Selectmen is authorized to take any other action necessary or convenient to carry out this project provided, however, that this vote shall not take effect until the town votes to exempt from the limitation on total taxes imposed by Chapter 59, Section 21C of the Massachusetts General Laws, Proposition 2.5, amounts required to pay the principal of and interest on the borrowing authorized by this vote as set forth on the ballot for the June 12, 2023 election.
Thank you, Ms. Herman. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Hudson. So a motion has been made and seconded. I'd like to now call on Chris Bullen from Parks and Recreation, the sponsor of this article. Chris?
Thank you. I'm going to try to be as brief as I can in appreciation for you 220 beautiful people who voted yes for that. So thank you.
Chris, are you waiting for a slide?
I think, yeah. Do we have a...
can we have this?
That's my slide, Chris. You got to get your own slide.
As you can see. Right.
That's also my slide.
I'll go without the slides. So what we're asking for is an outdoor recreation court and a swing set. These were both items that were in our community center for the past 20 years. They were integral to our services that we provided, and we'd like to continue to offer them. These items were included in the original budget. They were recommended to be included in the Article 1 by the Building Committee, and they were left out of that article by the Board of Selectmen. So what we're asking for is really, the reason we're asking for this is a couple of things. One is the master plan for Dover that was done in 2012 asked for outdoor recreation. So one of the things that this is going to do is provide outdoor recreation on the community center property. Outdoor recreation really has a couple of components that are critical. One of them is we need to have a place for that's accessible, in particular for seniors. The hard court surface is a place where seniors can spend time and be able to access outdoor activities. So that's one of the reasons for the court. The other one is we provide recreation programs on that court. We provide them in the summer. We have summer programming, which we'd like to offer in the community center. We can extend and expand that summer programming by having outdoor space as well. So there's a lot of value to the outdoor court and hard, think of it as just a hard surface off the parking lot is really what we're talking about here. For all of our programming needs throughout the year. The second thing is the swing set. As a parent of 4 children, and my wife's here somewhere, we would have to play zone where one of us would be with the kids and the other one would be doing something. And that's the kind of thing that a swing set provides in a community center situation. I can have my kids on the swing, my wife can be doing something inside the community center, and all is good. Without that opportunity, my kids would have been running around that building. So there's really a lot of benefits to having these amenities, and not even amenities, they're really essential. You know, we want to have both indoor and outdoor programming, and that's really the key here. The total we're asking for is $174,000. Over the course of, I think there's a tax table, but over the course of 20 years, for someone with a home assessed at $1.25 million, that's the annual bill. It's a $5 bill. That's what we're looking for. Please support this bill. Again, thank you for Article 1. Please add this to Article 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowen. I would now like to turn to Melissa Herman, the chair of the Warrant Committee, for their deliberations.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Warrant Committee had unanimously voted to recommend this article as written.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Herman. And now I would like to turn to John Jeffries from the Board of Selectmen.
Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, the Board of Selectmen are not anti-swing set. Chris, we love swing sets.
Actually, you use them all the time.
We use them all the time. I got way more kids than you do, so I do. When the process exceeded budget, the Board of Selectmen contracted a third-party independent engineering design firm to review every item in the community center budget. This process, as we have referred to, is called value engineering. Every item reviewed thoroughly. Very few items, as Chris mentioned, were removed. All the items recommended for removal by the third-party independent engineering firm were thoroughly addressed, debated endlessly. Article 2 could be any of the items that were removed during this value engineering process. The Board of Selectmen voted to remove this particular item for many reasons, some of which are there is already a basketball court by the tennis courts that's very seldom used. This could be repurposed. There are lights, there's parking. It's already used by many members of the community for the tennis. We ask you to understand our thinking. We ask you to understand the process. We asked you to understand the time and energy that went into this. Again, Chris, we are not anti-swing set. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jeffers. If there's no further discussion on this, we can move to a vote. Oh, Justine, do you want a microphone, or would you like? Well, you have to come down to the microphone, Justine, or we can bring you one.
Oh, that's
We're
not
trying
true.
to make sure
That's
you're-
not true.
We're trying to make sure you're on the video, Justine, for future posterity.
So I'm going over the question. Justine, these are my two questions.
Justine, name and address, sorry.
I said it.
Oh, you did, okay.
Oh, tell us again. Come on, Justine.
I think these handouts are terrific, by the way. I'm reading the Capital Budget Committee. This is my first question. And under Article 2, there's a reference to $500,000 that Park and Rec has in revolving account. So my first question is, why can't that money be used? My second question is, having been a two-term member of the Dover School Committee many years ago, the Carroll lot is small. It's only 3 acres. And my worry for all of this, especially now that we've passed the monies for the community center, is parking. I really would rather see this article, I guess I should say a no on this one.
No, just stay where you are. Justine, stay where you are.
Right there's fine.
I'd rather wait until we see what needs we have for parking first before we commit, at least for another construction project, especially with a hard surface on the Carroll property. And lastly, I'm 76. I don't think I'll be using the basketball. Thank you. But the question does remain about the $500,000.
Okay, thank you, Justine. Chris, do you want to answer that?
Thank you. The revolving fund is money that we receive for receipts for programs, and we spend that money to provide for more programs. One of the things that we're hoping to do is actually earn money on the outdoor recreation court and be another revenue source to continue to create revolving funds so we can continue to offer programs. One of the things we use the revolving fund for, in addition, is our version of, think of R&D, research and development on new programs. That we're going to have to come up with new programs for the community center, and we want to do that. That's our funding source. So those programs, the reason it's revolving is it revolves back through the programs themselves. That's the key. Second thing, to Mr. Jeffrey's comment, very interesting. He focused on the swing set, didn't say a thing about the recreation court. The recreation court is really the big piece, and that is very integral, as we said, to the revolving, the programs, recreation, and community. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And I would like to turn the microphone over to our town council, Nina Pickering Cook, because there's also a legal perspective on this that's very important.
Sure, to provide the legal perspective in response to Justine's question about using the revolving funds for capital expenditures, given the language in the statute governing revolving funds, that is not likely a permissible use of those funds.
Okay, thank you.
So, Jim, can I?
Yes, Mr. Swinger.
Hi, guys. I just want to make a clarification. When we went through that due diligence phase, there was a series of requests that were outside the construction of the building itself. And what we did was we went through that list. And the idea was to ask people who wanted to support various and sundry things, like stone walls for seating in the landscaping, or additional landscaping, or a trellis on the gymnasium wall. We asked them to first go to sort of source funding privately. So we didn't make judgments about these various and sundry things. We simply tried to divide it into what should be included in the construction documents, what would be, what do you call it? Add alternates, and what could be funded privately. So that was the thinking at that time. And it wasn't trivial. You're looking at about $300,000, $400,000 of things that we were looking to see if we can get funded privately.
So I just want to add one more item. The add alternates were suggested by the due diligence firm to try and raise private funds for those. They said most towns have a private funded component for these community centers. And again, as part of our diligence process, we were trying to find ways to reduce the overage of the cost for this community.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bolin?
Sorry, last comment. My right leg is indoor recreation, my left leg is outdoor recreation. This isn't a nice to have, it's my leg, okay? This is essential to what we're doing. Please give us the outdoor recreation court and the swing set. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no other comments or questions, I think we're ready to move to a vote. Okay, so this is a vote where you're asked to consider whether you would like to borrow and expend $174,000 for an outdoor recreation court and swing area. Since borrowing is involved, this will be a 2/3 vote. You may vote now, 1 for yes if you're in favor, 2 for no if you're opposed. The motion carries by 2/3. Okay, now to Article 3. Mr. Springett.
What am I supposed to do here? Mr. Moderator, I move the town raise and appropriate the sum of $40,000 for salaries and expenses related to operating the community center. You have a second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Springer. Do I hear a second?
Seconded.
Thank you, Mr. Jeffries. Mr. Springer, would you like to comment on this motion, sir?
Yeah, sure. Now that it's passed, and likelihood is we'll have a community center in the fall of 2020.
You're going to have to speak into the microphone.
Fall of 2024. Someone had raised the question, probably the town administrator, about providing staffing for the community center when it's in the process of the planning, the operational services and readiness phase. So the idea is to hire a community center director to ensure a smooth opening of the community center. The management and operational staff need to begin working together in planning, probably by March of 2024. That would give the operating team, the community center director, time to build relationships, time to build teaming, and time to work through the long list of issues and questions that have to be resolved before we open the center. When Ford and I were going around looking at various and sundry community centers, it was clear to us that the best run community centers are run by someone, management professional, with the skills and experience of building a community building community access to the community center. So the early onboarding is really a planning step to make sure that we have the staff that we need, and the team bonding process to make sure that it is an effective and efficient team and ready for the community on opening day, if that's September of 2024, I guess is the target.
Thank you, sir. I would now like to call upon Melissa Herman, from Chair of the Warrant Committee, to present their view.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So our view on this was to not recommend this article and to request that it be deferred, this topic of operational expenses be deferred to a future meeting. Our reasoning for that, at the time of our review, the value is $50,000. It involved hiring of 3 staff and also an additional $10,000 in unidentified expenses. Our position is that because this is an operating expense, it is something that we could budget for in the fiscal 25 budget process. That would give us approval as early as May to be able to have someone on board as early as July. And because we just very recently approved this project to move forward today, if we were to commit funding for resources ahead of having like a very clear, now we're live with the project timeline, we would be concerned about setting that commitment now. So again, our recommendation was to not vote on this today and either do this in the special fall meeting or hold it for the fiscal 24 or fiscal 25 budget.
Thank you, Ms. Herman. Ms. Weld, name and address, please.
Kathy Weld, 29 Main Street. Mr. Moderator and fellow citizens, I'm speaking as a new member of the Parks and Recreation Commission. We believe that this article is both premature and unnecessary. First, it's premature to be voting on a budget and positions for a facility that's more than a year away from being operational, having a fall 2024 opening, unless we encounter supply chain or other kinds of delays. We'll have another more logical opportunity at the 2024 annual town meeting to address the Carroll Community Center budget. It's also premature to be voting on a management and operations scenario for which there's no clearly defined, discussed, and approved plan. We could use the time between now and the 2024 annual town meeting for dialogue between the citizens and the selectmen on this topic. As it is, CMAC, that would be the Carroll Management Advisory Committee, a 20-year-old committee of stakeholders and citizens at large charged with making recommendations to the Board of Selectmen on the management, operations, and maintenance of the Carroll facility. CMAC spent over a year researching other community centers on a number of topics, including management models. Its final recommendation a year ago took into account these findings, along with consideration of what would be best for Dover, given its small size, its strong sense of community, and its tradition of citizen involvement in its governance. To date, CMAC's recommendation has not been formally reviewed together with the selectmen, and the committee has since been dissolved. In addition to being premature, the article is unnecessary. There's no need to onboard someone in a specific new position of community center director or manager. We already have in place an outstanding, well-qualified, and professional executive team managing programs and services for all ages. Our Director of Parks and Recreation and Director of Council on Aging have proven well their ability to organize, communicate, and work collaboratively for our community. We need the better, relevant space, not better management. There is no need to find and onboard ahead of time the additional custodial services that will ultimately be needed when the facility opens. There will be no territory to clean, no spaces for which to provide setup and take down for various programs. Finally, Dover is a municipality, a community, not a business or corporation. Its governance is structured differently, its finances operate differently, and its primary goals are different. Neither the content nor the process represented in this article feel like community.
I'm sorry, Kathy, the time has run out. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Ms. Hunter.
This morning is not the time to debate how the community center is going to be run, but from the Board of Selectmen's perspective, it is a town building. The building has key stakeholders. Those stakeholders are COA and Park and Rec, and they will be at the table making decisions. However, the Board of Selectmen is responsible for the operations of the town, and as a town building, we believe strongly that the head of that building needs to be an employee reporting to the town administrator, who reports to the Board of Selectmen. We are trying to be proactive. We understand that the funds we're asking for are premature, but we believe that we should be thinking about how this building is going to be run prior to opening it, so that we don't make decisions that inadvertently hurt us in the end. So we, the Board of Selectmen, urge all of you to help us be proactive, to help us manage this town efficiently, and to approve voting for this amount. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Mr. Long.
Charlie Long, 121 Walpole Street. This article represents a continued enormous expansion of the payroll of the town, sponsored by the Board of Selectmen. This is not the first item that's happened in the last 2 or 3 years. There have already been a number of additional positions authorized. There is no need for these additional positions, and I hope this article is dismissed.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Any other questions or comments?
So Jim, I have one.
Mr. Springer.
So I just want to make it clear to people, I'm not sure it was, that this isn't, we're going to try, we've asked you to add $40,000 to onboard a professional to run the community center and give that person 6 months worth of time. So we're talking about 3 months of their salary. It would be included in the FY24 budget, a $52 million budget. So I don't really see why adding $40,000 to give us the flexibility to hire someone who is going to run a $25.4 million building and not giving them the time to come up to speed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Springer. Any other questions or comments? Ms. Well, did you want to finish your comments? No. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, well, I think we're ready to move to a vote on this. This is a majority vote because it's not coming from debt. So again, the vote is asking us to approve $40,000 related to opening and operating the community center. If you're in favor of this motion, you'll press 1 for yes. If you're opposed, you'll press 2 for no. You may vote now. The motion does not carry. Okay, we will now move to our last motion to adjourn the meeting. I would ask for a motion from Ms. Herman.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the special annual town meeting be dissolved.
Thank you, Ms. Herman. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on this? Okay, let's move to a voice vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.